The LA Kings are still searching for a 3-game winning streak. We talk about the latest loss to the Canucks, and it's a Kings fan feedback Friday on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years. And a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. It is a Kings fan feedback Friday. We've got a lot of emails to get to, but we're going to start with the Kings in action on Thursday night, playing game number 15 of the NHL season at home against the Vancouver Canucks, a Pacific Division rival. And this was after the Kings had posted 2 nice road wins in Nashville and in Minnesota. My big question going into this game: will the Kings show the consistency that good teams need to have? As for the Kings lineup against Vancouver, we would see that same top line that we've seen the last couple of games. Andrei Kopitar being joined by Adrian Kempe and Kevin Fiala on the top line. The second line was Philip Deneau centering Trevor Moore and Akil Thomas. Third line of Quentin Byfield with Alex Laferriere and Warren Foegele. And the fourth line, Trevor Lewis with Tanner Jeannot and Andre Lee. The defense would be, well, similar. We would have Mikey Anderson and not Jordan Spence. Actually, it was Vladislav Gavrikov that started the game with Mikey. You also had Joel Edmondson and Brant Clark. That was the second pairing that came over the boards to start the game. So I guess technically they were the second pairing, not the third pairing. And then, of course, you had Vladislav Gavrikov. Actually, it was Jordan Spence and Kyle Burroughs. But the defensive pairings were mixed up all night long. A lot of guys did not stay together, and it wasn't just because the Kings were killing penalties or anything like that. So the defense was kind of a mix mash, but it ended up being okay in the end. Darcy Kemper was in net. David Rittich was the backup. As for the game summary in this one, less than 2 minutes into the game, Quentin Byfield would get the puck at the blue line, skate around a couple of defenders, made a power move to the net, went through the top of the crease and put in a beautiful backhander to make it 1-0 Kings early on in the first period. For Q, his second of the season, Warren Foegele and Alex Laferriere with the assists. Later in the period, LA's Tanner Jeannot would put a high hit on Canucks leading scorer Brock Besser. Jeannot would be given a match penalty and ejected from the game. Brock Besser would not return. He was injured. Vancouver got a 5-minute major power play, and they would score 3 minutes and 35 seconds into that major penalty to tie up the game at 1-1. A bit of a fluky goal as well, with the Kings goalie Darcy Kemper actually kind of putting it into his own net. Second period, Vancouver's Jake DeBrusk would find himself alone at the side of the net, got a great pass from Canucks star defenseman Quinn Hughes. DeBrusk made a move around Darcy Kemper, and he was kind of out of his net, and that made it 2-1. Later in the period, the Kings would lose top pairing defenseman Mikey Anderson, took a shot to the head ear area, was bleeding, looked bad, taken off the ice, would not return. Quinn Hughes would then give the Canucks a 3-1 lead on a wrist shot from the point. JT Miller was screening Darcy Kemper. Kings defenseman Vladislav Gavrikov, though, would score on a similar wrist shot from the point to make it 3-2, but the Canucks would add an empty net goal and skate off with a 4-2 victory. As for the game stats in this one, the Kings outshot the Canucks 28-23. Special teams did not go the way of the Kings in this one. 0 for 4 on the power play, while the Canucks were 1 for 3 with that 5-minute major power play. Face-offs were slightly in favor of Vancouver, 25-24. Hits favored the Canucks 33-26, while block shots favored LA 21-18. So what was my big takeaway from this game? Well, I talked about it. The question was, would the Kings show consistency that really good teams have to have? And, well, I guess I'd have to say, based on the fact that they lost the game, no. But this was also a game that I'm not overly concerned about. The Kings, I thought, played a pretty good game. The Canucks played a little bit better. I thought it was just kind of one of those games where The Canucks capitalized on a couple opportunities and the Kings didn't. But overall, this was not like the Kings went out there and laid an egg. The Canucks were a little bit better. The Kings had some opportunities, but this was by far not a terrible performance by LA. As a fan, I can accept when the other team plays a little bit better than my team and wins. What I can't accept and get upset and frustrated about is when the Kings make dumb mistakes and take dumb penalties. And you can talk about the Jeannot penalty for sure, but and then just kind of beat themselves. I don't think that was the case necessarily in this one. I just think sometimes you give credit to the opponent. I thought the Kings played okay. I thought the Canucks played a little bit better, and they were able to get the victory. Like I said, Vancouver capitalized on a few of their chances. The Kings didn't, and that was the difference in the game. A quote of the game comes from Kings head coach Jim Hiller, who said afterwards, quote, "I thought they were a little bit quicker to pucks and a little bit stronger once they got there. It's an even game, but I thought they were a little bit quicker and a little bit stronger once they arrived. It's not something that we want to take pride in. They're trying to be that team, so give them full marks for that." So what was good for LA in this one? I thought Quentin Byfield certainly stood out, gets his second goal in as many games. Really nice power move to the net. And I thought Q was very active overall in this game, had a couple other scoring chances. He looked more confident to me. Hopefully the 2 goals in 2 games get him going because the Kings, obviously a really good Quentin Byfield, the guy who's putting the puck in the net, is a big deal for the LA Kings. So I thought that was something good. Then there were a lot of other good things for the Kings. They had scoring chances, but they just weren't able to finish on a few of those chances. What was not so good, we've talked about the bad penalties, and I won't go so far as to say the hit by Tanner Jeannot on Brock Besser was any kind of an intent to injure. It was a bit late. It was to the head area. I don't have a big problem with him getting ejected from the game. I was surprised, and by the way, if you didn't know, Tanner Jeannot has been suspended for 3 games by the NHL for that hit. And I mentioned I do a show called the Puck Podcast, so I pay attention to punishment doled out throughout the league. And 3 games is on the high end of a suspension from the NHL, unless it's just someone who's a repeat offender who's done multiple things. Usually 3 is the most they give out. So I thought that was a little bit high just based on what they traditionally do. I don't know that Tanner Jeannot is a repeat offender. He's a tough player. He's physical, but I don't know that he has any kind of a reputation of being a dirty player. I thought he could get a game, maybe 2, but I think 3 actually, just based on what they normally give out, was a bit on the high side. As for the penalty itself, he's got to be better. I know that he wants to bring a physical element, but if he's going to lay a hit like that, it's got to be a little bit faster and it's got to be more to the chest and not to the head. So he made a mistake. It ended up costing the Kings. I know the Kings penalty kill has been a lot better of late, but asking them to kill off a 5-minute major is a tall order against a good team like the Canucks and a guy running their power play like Quinn Hughes, who's elite. So that was obviously an issue. And the special teams overall, the Kings had 4 power play opportunities, and I think the power play is looking better. I like what they're trying to do in setting up Kevin Fiala to be a big part of it. But again, you've got 4 power play opportunities to try and respond, and the Kings didn't. I think the power play is improving, but the results are the results. Over 4 is over 4. So that was an issue. Injury update on Mikey Anderson. Indications are that while it was ugly and anything that happens to the head is something you take seriously, reports are that he did not suffer any kind of a concussion. He's day-to-day, and there's a chance he could play Saturday against the Blue Jackets. I personally, and I'm no doctor, obviously, I personally would hold him out, be on the safe side, give him an extra couple days of rest. It was scary, but glad it looks like Mikey Anderson is going to be okay. As far as the game against Vancouver, like I said, I thought they were a little bit better. I don't think the Kings were awful. Time to turn the page, get back on track, taking on a Columbus team that is not that great. It's a winnable game on Saturday. Turn the page and get back on track if you're the LA Kings. It is a Kings fan feedback Friday. We got a lot of emails. We're going to try and get them all in. That's coming up next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. Hims provides access to treatments that can give you that boost of confidence so that you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/locked on. The products mentioned are chewable compound products, which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on product and subscription plan. And we are so lucky here in Southern California. We have so many options for live sporting events. The Kings, obviously, you've got Chargers and Rams in the NFL, Lakers and Clippers in the NBA, and USC and UCLA college football and basketball going on. But it's not just about sports. We've got theater events, comedy shows, concerts, but no matter what you enjoy, you need to do what I do, and that's use Gametime for all your ticket needs. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, let us get to your emails. I'm going to read them in the order in which they were received, and some of them may have been edited for time purposes. I will just throw this out there. A lot of the emails that we got earlier in the week, they do seem a bit dated after, some of them came in, after the loss to Chicago, and they're, kind of hitting the panic button, and then you got the wins over Nashville and Minnesota, and suddenly, so I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe it would be better to wait later in the week to send in your emails, maybe like Wednesday or something. It's up to you guys. I'm going to read them regardless, but sometimes they do seem a little bit dated because of things that have gone on through the week. That being said, we start with Brian in Tampa, and he says, "You reward too many negative commenters. Friday's becoming a weekly whiner segment. All these people, are they even Kings fans? They seem to think they can just trade for any top player or any star that's available, and the Kings magically have enough salary cap space to sign top free agents. This isn't baseball. We can't just sign a bunch of superstars like Shohei Ohtani. I hate to burst their bubble, but these keyboard GMs do not know more than Hall of Famer Rob Blake. Meanwhile, we're 1 point away from leading the Pacific despite losing Doughty and starting the season with a huge road trip." And that was Brian in Tampa. Only thing I would say, and Brian, I messaged Brian, I told him this. He said, "You reward too many negative commenters." I'm not rewarding anyone. Anybody that sends an email, I read the email. That's it. And whatever they talk about, they talk about. I'm not going to, edit it and only pick positive emails, and I'm not going to edit it and only pick negative emails. It's the nature of people. They like to complain, and people are reactionary. And so, yeah, sometimes you get more negative comments, but I think overall, it's not, if it's too negative, all it is the reflection of what, people's opinions are. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not rewarding the negative comments. I'm reading whatever email people send in. And Brian, I appreciate your email and trying to call some of those people out, saying they're a little bit too negative, or maybe they're a little bit whiny. Our next email comes from Scott in Vegas. He says, "What is our overtime record over the last 2 years? Every time we go to overtime, I flip my remote in the air and I think that's it. And sure enough, we lose. In the game that comes down to 3 or 4 points at the end of the season to make the playoffs, these points are huge. Is it a culture thing? It's really odd when doing the eye test that other teams just seem better than we are at it. When I say other teams, I mean all teams seem better in overtime. Maybe I'm crazy here, but it seems like the Kings are like 4-15 in overtime over the past couple of years. Love to know the actual record and your thoughts on how you work on something like that. Maybe that's the most teams have, 1 or 2 heavy snipers that they rely on, and the Kings have more of a group scoring mentality, as in Kopitar isn't blowing by anyone with speed in a 3-on-3 situation. Anyway, go Kings go." That was Scott in Vegas. All right, Scott, I did a minutes-long investigation, And here are the results. Over the last 2 full seasons, plus this year so far for the LA Kings, the Kings' record in overtime or shootout is 17-24. They're 9-15 in overtime games. They're 8-9 in shootout games. And that includes being 0-3 this year, 0-2 in overtime, and 0-1 in a shootout. So not 4 for 15, but 17 for 24 isn't great either. As far as what do the Kings do to change it? I mean, like that Chicago overtime, the Kings dominated it and they deserved to win. And it just didn't happen for them as far as like time of possession and the amount of time they had the puck. But then you see a guy like Connor Bedard, these younger guys that can dangle and do these spectacular things, especially in the shootout. The Kings really don't have one of those guys. So I don't know if it's a mentality. Maybe it certainly can be a thing. If you know you're just, for whatever reason, not performing in it, it can be a mental thing. But overall, the Kings are certainly not as good as we would like them to be when the game goes beyond regulation. That's for sure. Robert in Hawthorne checks in and says, my issue is Jim Hiller still mixing up the lines with no stability. Is this handicapping the lines to where they aren't building chemistry? Well, I would say defensively, the way he's been mixing things up, it seems to have worked. It seems like the defense is kind of on their toes. They don't really care who they play with. It's more about, doing your job and your responsibility and not worrying about chemistry with your line mate. I don't know. It seems like it's working okay with the defense. I think offensively, I like some of the moves he's made. I wasn't a huge fan of Quentin Byfield going back to the wing. I'm glad he's moved him back to center because I think that's where he needs to be, and it didn't really provide much of a spark. Kevin Fiala on the top line. I think I like that as well. There is kind of a hole with Akil Thomas playing in the top six, but I don't have a huge issue with the lines being moved around the way they have so far. From Andy in Pico Rivera, he says, I became a Kings fan a couple years ago when I got free tickets in a giveaway at my school. Thank you for helping me learn the game through your daily show. Since I started watching, the Kings seem to have struggled 3-on-3 overtime and the shootout. I was wondering if there's any change that you would make to the lineup or strategy in those situations. Also, with Jim Hiller often changing the lines to look for a spark, have we not seen Fiala on the top line with Kopi and Kempe? Keep up the great work. I really appreciate all you do for the Kings community. That was Andy in Pico Rivera. And again, that was obviously an email that was sent in before Jim Miller decided to put Kevin Fiala on the top line, and it certainly worked out for a couple of games. They didn't produce as far as getting any points in the game against Vancouver, but they did have some opportunities, and I think that line going forward can be a very good line for the LA Kings. Scott in Simi Valley checks in. He says, Q should be playing center every game. It's his natural position, and he's got to put in time there if the Kings want him to become an excellent NHL center. Unfortunately, as it now stands, Q's shot is not going to take him far at the NHL level. Previously, Q had issues with his skating. He got help and looked how well he's responded. He's very coachable. Q's shot is not particularly hard. His release isn't the most deceptive, and above all, he usually fires it wide. Gretzky once said, you don't score 100% of the shots you don't take, but barring a bounce off someone or something, you don't score on 100% of the shots that go wide either. It's no mystery, and it's easily solved. Practice and mentoring is all Q needs to reach the next level and score plenty of goals. If the team somehow doesn't see this or doesn't have the time and resources to continue developing young players who made the roster, then we'll just have to wait for Q to solve it himself, and it could take a season or two. To me, it would be better to work on Q's shot right now, and maybe everyone is too busy for that. And again, this was an email sent in before Quentin Byfield scored his last 2 goals. So I don't know if Scott feels any differently after the last 2 goals, but he feels that Quentin Byfield needs to work on his shot. I think the way Q scores most of his goals are on like deflections and moves around the net. He's not, I don't know. I do agree with you that his shot is not sniper quality. He's not Adrian Kempe who's going to, go bar down or put it in the top corner. But again, as you pointed out, it is something he can work on, and it's something that he will need to get better at. But hopefully the last couple of goals will help get Quentin Byfield on track. We still have more emails to go, and we will get to those next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And of course, FanDuel is there for you to bet on college football, the NFL, NBA, and college basketball. Of course, the NHL. The Kings are favored by a goal and a half this Saturday against Columbus. The over-under is 6.5. How about college football? USC, an 8.5-point underdog at home against Nebraska. The over-under 54.5. Join FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, our next email comes from Brian in Los Alamitos, and he says, I know it's still early in the season, but in your opinion, who won the PLD Darcy Kemper trade? As of the writing of this email, PLD has 6 points in 12 games. Kemper is 4-1-3. I haven't seen where I was. That was the end of the email. I was going to say I haven't seen Pierre-Luc Dubois play 1 second with the Washington Capitals. I obviously watch all the Kings games, and I usually watch all the highlights of the games around the NHL. Once football season ends, then I start kind of investing more in watching games of other teams. So I can't intelligently tell you what kind of impact Pierre-Luc Dubois has had. I will say 1 goal and 5 assists I think he has on the season is certainly not impressive. His stats aren't great, but like I said, I haven't seen him play, so I don't want to say I can't say for sure, what kind of impact he's had with the Washington Capitals. I know the Capitals are playing very, very well more better than expected. Alexander Ovechkin has been on fire, and the way he's going, he might pass Wayne Gretzky this year for the most career goals in a season, which would be amazing. But I would say, based on just the stats and based on the importance of position and based on what they're paying these guys, I would say Darcy Kemper. I would say the Kings have won the trade. I think Darcy Kemper has been really good for the Kings. And it looks to me, again, not having seen him play, that Pierre-Luc Dubois has been Again, haven't seen him, so I can't say 100% for sure, but that's that. You asked me the question, I'm giving you my answer. Our next email comes from Darren. He's in Phoenix. He says, I've been a passionate Kings fan for as long as I can remember, dating back to watching Marcel Dion and the Triple Crown line taking the ice at the fabulous Forum. The other day, your podcast was titled, Who Are the Kings? Which is a great segue to my question, which is more about your show, to have a better understanding of Eddie. Who is Eddie? Is Eddie a hockey analyst that has credibility to analyze strategies, plays, execution techniques, production of players and coaches in detail, such as Jim Fox or Daryl Evans? Or is Eddie like us, a diehard passionate fan that offers content and opinions based on emotions, that has an understanding of the game and delivers a great show? My Friday feedback is in reaction to your response to Jim Miller's quote following our loss to the Hawks. Quote, he's quoting me now. It's really tough to get a read on who the Kings really are. Good teams put away bad teams, especially at home. Good teams find a way to close out games against bad competition. The fan in me wants the Kings to win every game and kick the crap out of the Oilers and hoist the cup. But the true reality is that the NHL is a very long and rigorous season. Any team could win on any given night, completely disagreeing with your quotes above. There are struggling teams, but there are not one bad team. The Kings lose to struggling teams in a disappointing fashion should not define them in who the Kings are, or to take a safe approach and not overly getting excited about a win or a good start to a long season. The reality is that we are going to suck at times, find a way to lose games where it felt like we were the better team, and go through a funk. We need to back our boys every night, not taking the safe approach as a fan, and give them grace and believe, because there are no bad teams in the NHL. Keep your cup half full. It's time to start believing. Thank you for all you do. Go Kings, go. And that was Darren in Phoenix. Well, Darren, I had never played in the NHL. I never coached in the NHL. So I definitely am not qualified to analyze hockey at the level of a Jim Fox or a Daryl Evans. And I would never pretend to do that. I would consider myself, and I've mentioned this a lot of times, I'm a fan first. I think I'm an educated fan. I think I'm a fan who knows how to put a few sentences together and hopefully deliver a informative and interesting show to help you guys stay up on the LA Kings. But I will just say this. I'm giving my opinions in the moment. I can't. Yes, you're right. It's a long season. But I can't say, well, they lost to the Blackhawks. Let's see what happens in 2 weeks. I mean, I have to do a show that day, so I have to give you an opinion on what happened that day. I don't think I'm overly reactionary. I don't think I'm a sky is falling guy. I think I'm pretty even keeled. I've mentioned on the show before exactly what you said. When you look at a season at the end of the season, there's going to be some games where you're like, how did we lose to that team? And there's going to be some games where you're like, man, I can't believe we beat that team. And so I've mentioned that. But I will disagree with you. There are bad teams in the NHL. there are. The Blackhawks are going to be a terrible team. The Sharks are a terrible team. Those are two bad losses to the Kings. Yes, you're right. There are always chances that, if you don't play your best, you can lose, but they're bad teams. And at the end of the year, they're going to have lottery picks. They're going to be picking in the top 5, those two teams. So I would disagree. And that there are times when you do have to say that's a bad loss to a bad team. Again, I get your point. Any given night, sometimes things happen. But look, I believe in the Kings. I support the Kings. I'm gonna try and be positive as much as I can, but I also have to call a spade if they lose to a bad team and play a bad game. Brian in Diamond Bar checking in. He says, and by the way, I met Brian and his girlfriend Courtney at a Kings Blackhawks game, the Kings Blackhawks game. It was nice to meet them. He says, I'm worried the Kings suffer from what I call the mirror effect. Basically, we played horrible when we played against the lower ranked teams. On the opposite side, we play amazing against top teams in the league. It's frustrating to watch, and I hope they can snap out of it fast. Thoughts? Let's get into the 2 road games. Kopi is still producing with a high hockey IQ like no other. Great goal from behind the net. I was happy to see Fiala blossom from his benching with the amazing rebound goal. I think Lewis's unselfish pass to Kempe from the Predators, or for the Predators, for the final goal shows you how much of a class act he really is. So excited to see Byfield finally get his first goal of the season, and was an amazing deflection from a Gavrikov pass. I now expect Byfield to have another best of the year highlight like he did last year. Hope this gets him in the right headspace moving forward, as many Kings fans expect a lot out of him. I see Fogle stepping up along with LaFerriere this season in a way I did not see coming. And again, that was Brian in Diamond Bar. I would say, in reference to your mirror effect, that I think it's a bit tainted, and I understand why the losses to Chicago and San Jose. But I would say the Kings have pretty much taken care of business against lesser competition. They beat Buffalo, they beat Anaheim, they did beat San Jose in the home opener. They beat Montreal, they beat Nashville. None of those teams are very good, and the Kings took care of business against those teams. So yes, the 2 losses to Chicago and San Jose were bad, but the Kings have beaten most of the teams that they should have beaten so far. Our final email comes from Chris in Northern Nevada. He says, seeing Byfield score early in the Vancouver game, and immediately the ketchup bottle analogy popped in my mind. I think you're right. His offensive game is going to start flowing, and you could see it coming. Great take the other day. On Monday, I was driving home from work and listening to the game on Sirius XM and had the Nashville broadcast on. I found it interesting to hear their perspective on the Kings. They were talking about how fast LA is and how, although they haven't won a playoff series, they've pushed Edmonton every year. They were also giving a ton of respect to Kopitar, which he obviously deserves. We don't always get to hear how other teams perceive the Kings, and I just found it interesting. Really liking how it seems the Kings are finding their game. Didn't see this team as in first place, but I'll take it. Great first month so far, especially with 10 road games to start. Eddie, you're doing a great job with the podcast. Keep it up. I'm a loyal listener every day. Go Kings, go. And that was from Chris in Carson City, Nevada. Mostly I like to listen to the local broadcasts and the TV coverage because they know us best. Sometimes you watch other games and they're like, oh boy, that they don't know our team, and they shouldn't. They're following their own team. But I will agree. I do like sometimes watching the national broadcast, the TNT or the ESPN coverage, just to kind of get, like you said, a different perspective from other people that don't necessarily watch the Kings all the time, and kind of get their opinions. So I do enjoy that as well. All right. Thank you to everyone who took the time to email. There were 2 emails I didn't get to. I apologize to you guys for that. I think it was Carlos and Ed. So sorry about that, guys, but they really get angry with me if I go over 30 minutes on the show. But thank you to everyone who sent in an email. This show literally is not possible without your participation. All right. We've got Kings Blue Jackets on Saturday, 6 p.m. LA time. It is going to be broadcast on KCAL 9 and you can hear the game on the 710 ESPN app. I will be out at the game. If everybody wants to meet up, feel free to reach out with an email or on social media. For you everydayers, going into next week, Monday show, we're going to recap the Kings Blue Jackets and preview that night's Kings Flames game. Tuesday, a recap of the Kings Flames. Wednesday, we'll preview the Kings Avalanche, and we'll try and have a special guest. Thursday, recap that game, and then Friday, have another Kings fan feedback show. That is the week ahead here on Locked On LA Kings. You want to get an email for the feedback show? The address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section as well. Love you to stay interactive with the show on Twitter and X, social media, also Instagram. We're at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.